"You shouldn't be here," Madeline Carter whispered, barely audible over the clatter of plates and low hum of conversation, her eyes locked on the towering figure approaching the diner's door. Grayson Cole, billionaire CEO of Cole Enterprises, moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding rooms, his tailored charcoal suit flawless, shoes clicking sharply against the tile floor. The door swung open and a gust of cold air swept in, carrying the faint scent of winter streets and city exhaust, ruffling Madeline's dark ponytail. She straightened, adjusting her apron, pen hovering above the notepad as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment all her life. Grayson's sharp gray eyes scanned the room, assessing the space with precision, yet failing to notice her until she stepped forward with quiet poise, placing a fresh cup of coffee on a nearby table and letting her gaze briefly meet his, unwavering, calm. The din of the diner faded into the background as his focus centered on the unexpected composure of the waitress who everyone else had overlooked. "I said, I don't want the usual menu," he barked, voice sharp but not unkind, the kind that demanded immediate attention and submission. Madeline's lips curved into a subtle, enigmatic smile, barely lifting her chin. "Of course, sir," she replied, her tone neutral, yet carrying a weight of self-assuredness that seemed to ripple through the air. She could feel the tension radiating off him, the quiet arrogance of someone used to power bending the world to his will, yet she remained steady, a calm in the storm, her mind racing through every detail, every tiny irregularity she had noticed upon his entrance. Grayson stepped closer, the edges of his jaw taut, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath as their eyes locked. She moved with the practiced ease of someone who had mastered control under pressure, adjusting a chair, straightening a napkin, all mundane motions made extraordinary by the intensity behind them. "Who are you?" he asked finally, a mix of curiosity and disbelief threading his words. Madeline glanced at him, blue-gray eyes calm, observing, calculating. "Just someone who knows what to notice," she said softly, her voice cutting through the din with quiet clarity. The subtle confidence, the unassuming yet sharp intelligence, left him momentarily speechless, caught between his habitual arrogance and the undeniable reality before him. The hum of conversations, the scraping of silverware, even the distant sizzle from the kitchen became background, the focus narrowing to the interplay of two worlds colliding, one of immense power, the other of hidden capability waiting to be acknowledged. She had noticed the flicker of unease in the security guard's stance, the way the other diners unconsciously shifted at his presence, subtle signs that would have escaped anyone else, but not her. And in that silence, the air charged, the diner itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, holding the moment just long enough for Grayson to register, truly register, that the waitress he had dismissed as ordinary might just have the kind of awareness and quiet strength that could change the course of everything. He swallowed hard, a subtle shift in his posture, the first crack in the armor of certainty, while she continued with her work, unflinching, deliberate, leaving the scene charged, unresolved, a quiet promise that what followed would be far more than either could predict. Madeline Carter moved swiftly across the diner, her eyes scanning the room while her hands worked with precise efficiency, refilling coffee cups, straightening silverware, and taking orders with a calm, deliberate grace that drew the attention of both staff and patrons alike. Grayson Cole remained at the edge of the dining area, observing quietly, noting the way she carried herself, the subtle confidence in every movement, the measured pauses that suggested she was calculating, anticipating, always 3 steps ahead. There was something about the way she interacted with the other customers, polite yet unobtrusive, that commanded respect without demanding it. Her dark eyes briefly met his again, and in that instant he caught a flicker of awareness, of comprehension, as if she had already seen more of the world and its hidden patterns than he had in decades of business. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long stripes of light across the checkered floor, highlighting the simplicity of the diner, the mundane details that she seemed to elevate with her presence. A small commotion at the counter drew her attention for a moment, but she handled it without haste, guiding a nervous customer with a few quiet words and a reassuring gesture, never losing her focus. Grayson found himself leaning slightly forward, compelled to follow her every move, his mind racing as he tried to reconcile the unassuming appearance with the undeniable competence he had already witnessed. He noticed the slight tremor in her hand as she handed a cup of coffee to an elderly man, and yet it was tempered by steady control, a balance of sensitivity and precision. She paused briefly, jotting notes on her pad, and glanced at the wall clock, the minute hand creeping steadily toward closing time. Yet she showed no sign of rush, no hint of stress, only calm purpose. Grayson's pulse quickened in ways unrelated to fear or excitement. It was curiosity, awe, a recognition of intelligence in motion. He had seen many people in high-stakes situations, but rarely anyone who could convey both authority and humility so effortlessly, who could manipulate the flow of attention and action without raising their voice or demanding notice. Outside, the wind rattled the diner windows, carrying a chill from the early evening. Yet inside, the warmth of the lighting and the hum of soft conversation contrasted with the electric tension building silently between them. Grayson considered speaking, asking how she had acquired such poise, such awareness, but he hesitated, realizing words could disrupt the fragile equilibrium she maintained with the room, with the people around her, and perhaps even with him. She noticed his gaze and allowed a tiny, almost imperceptible smile, as if acknowledging his presence while simultaneously asserting her independence, her unspoken message clear. She was in control of herself, her environment, and the moment, and he was merely a witness to it. The scent of coffee and baked bread mingled with the faint crispness of winter air seeping in through the door, creating a sensory backdrop for the silent exchange of awareness and respect. Every detail mattered, and Madeline seemed to know which details to emphasize, which to ignore, guiding the flow of the diner as effortlessly as a conductor guiding an orchestra. Grayson shifted slightly, the weight of his suit suddenly heavy, the usual confidence tempered by the realization that he had underestimated her, as he often did with those who appeared quiet, unassuming, or ordinary. And in that slow, deliberate motion, the quietest person in the room revealed that the measure of power was not in visibility, but in the ability to act decisively, thoughtfully, and with unseen expertise, leaving him with a sense of anticipation, a recognition that this encounter was only the beginning of a story he had yet to fully comprehend. The late afternoon sun slanted through the diner windows, casting golden stripes across the worn linoleum floor, and Madeline Carter moved among the tables with quiet assurance, each step measured, each gesture purposeful. Grayson Cole lingered near the counter, watching, the crisp winter air trailing in behind him from the open door, tugging at the edges of his tailored coat. His eyes, normally sharp with business calculation, softened slightly as he observed her in motion, how she spoke to the regulars with warmth, how she balanced efficiency with genuine attentiveness, and how her presence seemed to calm the nervous energy in the room without demanding acknowledgement. A customer dropped a fork near the booth at the back, a small clatter that might have gone unnoticed by anyone else. But Madeline was immediately there, bending smoothly to retrieve it, her hand brushing the table just enough to steady the trembling young man who had dropped it. Grayson's jaw tightened as he recognized the pattern, the subtlety, the invisible thread she controlled without anyone perceiving. He noted the way she paused briefly, glancing at the clock above the kitchen door, then back at him, her expression unreadable yet inviting him to notice what he had not before, that she was constantly assessing, always aware, blending into the environment while shaping it. The scent of fresh bread and coffee mingled with the faint chill from outside, yet in the center of it all, the tension between them created a small pocket of heightened perception, where every gesture, every glance carried weight. Madeline adjusted the sugar packets at the counter with precise alignment, then took a notepad from the rail, moving to the next table with an effortless fluidity that seemed almost choreographed, and Grayson could not help but follow with his eyes, tracing the pattern of her actions as if mapping an unseen network of intention. He realized, with a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold, that she had already absorbed more information in the last 5 minutes than many executives he knew would gather in a full day of meetings. The subtle, deliberate nod she gave a colleague who passed behind the coffee machine went unnoticed by all but him, yet it conveyed coordination, foresight, and unspoken authority. Grayson shifted, crossing his arms, intrigued and unsettled. The veneer of dominance he relied upon feeling strangely fragile in the presence of someone who exerted control without demanding it. A soft laugh echoed from a nearby booth, a child thanking her for a warm cookie, and she smiled in reply, genuine and light, her eyes flicking briefly to his before returning to the task at hand, signaling with the smallest movement that she was both aware of him and entirely independent of his attention. The hum of the kitchen, the scrape of chairs, the clink of plates, all merged into a rhythmic backdrop as if the diner itself waited, holding its breath, for the next movement in this quiet dance. Grayson realized that in every subtle shift of weight, every glance, every pause, she was teaching him a lesson in observation and humility, the lesson that power is not always loud and visible, but can reside in precision, composure, and unseen intelligence. The moment stretched, the golden light catching the edges of the window blinds, and for a single heartbeat, he recognized that nothing he had ever commanded could compare to the calm decisiveness before him, the quiet force of someone who had mastered herself completely. In that stillness, the diner felt like a stage, and Madeline the conductor of a performance he was only just beginning to understand, leaving him both captivated and unsettled, certain that the encounter was far from over and that the lessons he had glimpsed were only the beginning. The late afternoon light had begun to soften, casting long, warm shadows across the diner, and Madeline Carter moved with effortless rhythm from table to table, her hands steady, her posture calm, and her eyes always scanning, always aware. Grayson Cole watched her from the edge of the room, noting how she adjusted the sugar packets with meticulous care, how she tilted her head slightly when listening to a customer explain a simple problem, and how she responded with subtle gestures that conveyed empathy without breaking the flow of her work. A small boy dropped his cup near the corner booth, and Madeline was immediately there, crouching slightly, hand steady as she set the cup upright, smiling softly and whispering words of reassurance that made the child grin with relief. Grayson felt a tightening in his chest, a mixture of admiration and disbelief, realizing that every action she took was precise, deliberate, and entirely self-contained, a quiet mastery that no amount of wealth or power could replicate. He followed her movements with careful attention, the hum of conversation and clatter of dishes fading into a muted backdrop as he traced the path of her every gesture. She straightened the chairs around a table of elderly patrons with a grace that seemed effortless, then paused to glance at the register, noting the time, the flow of customers, and the subtle cues from the staff, a network of observations that she maintained invisibly but with perfect accuracy. Grayson leaned slightly forward, intrigued and unsettled, as he realized that the woman he had dismissed moments ago as merely a server was orchestrating the environment around her with awareness and skill that rivaled his own strategic calculations. A waitress passed behind Madeline, exchanging a quiet nod, and she responded with a fraction of a smile, the tiniest acknowledgement, yet it carried authority and reassurance, a silent command that he could not ignore. The late afternoon light caught the edges of her apron, the gentle curve of her movements, the controlled breath and measured pace, and Grayson recognized that power often wore an unassuming face, that influence could be exerted without raising a voice or demanding attention. Outside, the wind whispered through the city streets, rattling the edges of the open door, but inside, the warmth and rhythm of the diner created a space in which her calm decisiveness held sway. He could see now that she observed everything. The slight hesitation of a customer, the shifting posture of a colleague, the subtle signals of the room itself, and adapted instantly, aligning her actions with the unfolding dynamics without ever appearing rushed or flustered. In that quiet control, in the absence of obvious displays of authority, Grayson felt the impact of her presence deeply, the realization settling that this encounter was more than a simple exchange of service, that the woman in front of him held a rare combination of awareness, skill, and composure that commanded respect without demanding it. And as Madeline moved toward the counter to check on the orders, adjusting a tray with effortless precision, he understood that what he had witnessed was only a glimpse of her capabilities, a subtle, undeniable statement that quiet strength and unseen competence often carried far greater weight than any outward show of power, leaving him both captivated and unsettled, eager to see what unfolded next. The evening shadows deepened across the diner, softening the edges of the tables and casting a warm glow over the polished counters, and Madeline Carter moved with the same effortless precision, her every gesture measured yet fluid, attentive to the rhythm of the room and the subtle cues of those around her. Grayson Cole observed from his usual vantage point near the window, noting the interplay of light and shadow, the way her hands arranged the condiments with deliberate care, the tilt of her head as she listened to the soft murmur of conversation, and the way she responded to each request with calm assurance. Never hurried, never flustered. A young couple at a corner booth whispered their order hesitantly, and Madeline approached, kneeling slightly to meet their eyes, her smile gentle yet confident, her voice steady as she explained the specials and recommended a few choices, the nuances of her tone conveying empathy and professionalism simultaneously. Grayson's attention was riveted. Every detail, from the subtle adjustment of a chair to the precise placement of a sugar packet, seemed intentional, an unspoken choreography that maintained harmony in the diner without ever appearing forced. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the edges of the door, bringing a chill that contrasted with the warmth inside, yet she moved seamlessly through the space, bridging these worlds with ease. She noticed a small discrepancy at the register, a minor oversight that could have disrupted the flow, and corrected it instantly, a flick of her wrist and a glance that ensured everything remained orderly without drawing attention to her action. Grayson's mind raced, tracking the sequence of her observations, the subtle patterns she maintained, the way she anticipated the needs of customers and colleagues alike, all without a single misstep. He realized that her quiet presence carried a kind of authority far more potent than any raised voice or overt command. It was the control born of awareness and intelligence, visible only to those who truly watched. A waiter passed behind her, and she responded with a brief nod, a gesture that conveyed acknowledgement and coordination simultaneously, reinforcing her presence while remaining unobtrusive. The ambient noise, the low hum of conversation, the clinking of plates, the soft hiss from the espresso machine, faded into a gentle backdrop as Grayson noted her timing, her subtle pauses, the way she drew attention only when necessary and allowed the space to breathe at other moments, a natural rhythm that few could achieve. He adjusted his coat, feeling the weight of his own presence, realizing that the power dynamics he was accustomed to were irrelevant here. She moved through the room with an influence that was quiet yet unmistakable. Every motion, every glance, every decision she made subtly guided the environment, shaping the diner's energy, the flow of attention, and the comfort of its patrons, and Grayson understood that this was far more than service, it was mastery. As she returned to the counter to set down a fresh tray of coffee, her eyes briefly met his, the smallest spark of recognition and understanding passing between them, and he felt a quiet shift inside, a deep curiosity and respect for the intelligence and composure that she wielded without fanfare, leaving him aware that the true impact of her presence had only begun to unfold. The diner's overhead lights flickered briefly as evening deepened into night, and Madeline Carter continued her steady movements, adjusting the condiments, refilling water glasses, and guiding patrons with quiet, unassuming authority. Grayson Cole watched from his usual spot near the corner window, leaning slightly forward, the soft glow of the streetlights outside casting a subtle reflection across his sharp gray eyes. Each time she approached a table, her hands moved with deliberate care, her posture composed, and her voice calm and clear as she spoke to each customer, offering recommendations or answering questions without hurry, without hesitation. A small, elderly woman at the end booth coughed softly, and Madeline immediately appeared, kneeling slightly, her hand brushing the table as she adjusted a pillow behind the woman's back, her tone gentle and measured, reassuring, eliciting a faint, grateful smile. Grayson could not look away, captivated by the contrast between her unassuming demeanor and the precision of her awareness. She noticed what others missed, anticipated what others failed to see, and moved in a way that conveyed both competence and empathy. The hum of conversation and the occasional clatter of dishes seemed to form a rhythm around her, punctuated by the soft hiss of the espresso machine and the subtle scent of fresh bread and brewed coffee mingling in the air. A teenager near the counter dropped a menu, and she was instantly at his side, hands steady, guiding him to retrieve it, her smile encouraging, her gaze quick to scan the room for any other disturbances. Grayson's mind raced, trying to catalog every detail, every small interaction, understanding that her effectiveness relied not on strength or volume, but on perception and timing, on the quiet but decisive interventions that shaped the flow of the entire diner. She paused for a moment, glanced at him with an almost imperceptible nod, and continued, adjusting silverware and napkins with meticulous attention, and Grayson realized that every motion carried intention, a careful orchestration of space, attention, and human behavior that he had never fully appreciated. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves and rattled the door frame. But inside, Madeline maintained a calm, ordered environment, guiding interactions with a subtle, invisible hand, and Grayson felt a mixture of respect, curiosity, and something akin to awe, witnessing the mastery of someone who commanded the room without demanding it. Each time she glanced toward the kitchen, she caught cues from her colleagues, adjusted timing, and coordinated movements without a word, and he could see the intelligence, patience, and careful observation embedded in every action. The warmth of the diner, the soft glow of the lamps, the gentle murmur of conversation, and the precise rhythm of her motions created a space where her quiet authority was palpable, and Grayson recognized that in all his experience, he had rarely encountered someone who wielded such influence without overt power, leaving him aware that the events of the evening were only the beginning of an encounter that would linger in his mind long after the last customer had left. The diner had settled into the quiet hum of the evening, the last customers lingering over coffee and desserts, and Madeline Carter moved with calm precision, her hands arranging the trays, wiping the counters, and adjusting the chairs, each motion deliberate, measured, and graceful. Grayson Cole remained near the corner window, observing her closely, noting the subtle cues she gave to her colleagues, the way she anticipated the needs of each patron, and how she managed the space with an ease that contrasted sharply with the usual chaos of busy service. She paused for a moment at a table near the center, bending slightly to help a young man struggling to organize his belongings, her voice soft but clear. "Here, let me help you with that." And a gentle smile eased his embarrassment. Grayson's gaze followed every motion, captivated by the combination of efficiency and empathy, by the quiet authority that seemed to emanate from her without a word of command. The warm light from the overhead fixtures highlighted the small gestures, the tilt of her head, the soft movement of her hands, the way she balanced attention between multiple tables without ever appearing hurried. A couple at the corner booth whispered among themselves, and she leaned in, listening intently, her eyes scanning for any discomfort, any hesitation, and responded with precise recommendations, her tone confident and reassuring. Grayson noticed the meticulous alignment of napkins and utensils as she straightened the table near the register, a small act that spoke volumes of her attention to detail, of her commitment to order, and of the subtle influence she held over the flow of the room. Outside, the wind rustled the remaining leaves, but inside, the warmth and gentle chatter of patrons created a steady rhythm that she guided effortlessly, her presence commanding the space with quiet assurance. Every glance, every nod she gave, every soft word directed toward a staff member carried weight and direction, an invisible architecture of control that shaped the evening without imposing it. Grayson felt a growing respect, a recognition that her strength lay not in force or volume, but in observation, timing, and the ability to act decisively in subtle ways, creating impact without spectacle. As she moved back toward the counter to check on the orders, her eyes briefly met his, conveying awareness, competence, and a calm confidence that left him unsettled, intrigued, and profoundly impressed. The hum of conversation, the occasional clatter of a dish, and the soft hiss of the coffee machine formed a gentle background as she orchestrated the room's flow, and Grayson realized that he had underestimated her entirely, that the true measure of her capability and quiet authority was only beginning to reveal itself. In that shared glance, in the silent understanding of competence and composure, he recognized a rare intelligence at work, one that would linger in his mind long after the diner emptied. leaving him aware that this encounter was not simply a moment in a restaurant, but the beginning of a story far larger than he could yet comprehend. The diner's lights dimmed slightly as the evening grew later, casting a warm amber glow across the tables, and Madeline Carter moved with quiet precision, her every action deliberate, measured, and graceful. Grayson Cole remained near the corner, leaning slightly against the window frame, his sharp gray eyes tracking her with intense focus, noticing the subtle cues in her posture, the measured movements of her hands, and the way she engaged with each customer and staff member with both attentiveness and calm authority. A young family struggled to organize their table, and she approached with a gentle, assured presence, kneeling just enough to meet their eye level, guiding them with quiet, confident words that reassured without commanding. The rhythm of the diner, the soft hum of conversation, the clinking of plates, the faint hiss from the coffee machine, created a backdrop that accentuated the fluidity of her actions, each gesture purposeful and efficient, yet infused with empathy and awareness. Grayson's mind raced, cataloging every movement, every pause, every glance, realizing that she orchestrated the space around her without anyone noticing, subtly guiding interactions, maintaining balance, and ensuring comfort. The scent of warm bread and freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint chill from the street outside, creating a sensory landscape where her quiet authority was felt rather than announced. She paused briefly at the counter to coordinate with a colleague, a simple nod and the slight lift of her brow conveying instructions and acknowledgement with perfect subtlety, reinforcing her influence over the flow of the room without drawing attention to herself. Grayson found himself leaning forward, captivated, unsettled, and intrigued, understanding that her competence relied not on overt power or display, but on observation, timing, and the ability to anticipate and respond. Every detail mattered. The tilt of a chair, the alignment of utensils, the precise timing of a gesture, the way she engaged with patrons and staff alike, harmonizing the space with invisible skill. Outside, the wind carried the sounds of the city through the open door, yet inside, the warmth and controlled rhythm of the diner persisted, guided by her unseen hand. Grayson's pulse quickened as he realized the full scope of her capabilities, the depth of her awareness, and the impact of her presence, leaving him with a growing respect and curiosity for the quiet, decisive authority she wielded effortlessly. Her glance briefly met his across the room, subtle, steady, almost imperceptible, and in that moment, he recognized that what he had been witnessing all evening was far more than ordinary service. It was mastery, an unspoken command of space, attention, and human behavior that would resonate with him long after the diner emptied, leaving him both captivated and eager for what might unfold next in the presence of someone so unexpectedly powerful. The diner was nearly empty now, the last customers leaving with quiet thanks, and Madeline Carter moved toward the counter, her steps measured, her hands busy straightening menus and wiping crumbs from the edge of the tables, each motion deliberate and precise. Grayson Cole remained near the window, the streetlights reflecting faintly in the glass as he watched her, noting the careful alignment of the chairs, the subtle gestures she used to signal to the staff, the way she carried herself with calm authority and effortless grace. A final customer approached to thank her for the evening, and she nodded, her smile small but warm, her voice steady and clear as she responded, "It was my pleasure. I hope you enjoyed everything." And the man departed, leaving a sense of completion and order behind him. Grayson felt a mixture of awe and curiosity, realizing that every small action she had taken throughout the evening had been deliberate, each step a component of an invisible architecture of control and influence that she maintained over the room without demanding notice. The soft hum of conversation from the staff cleaning up, the clinking of utensils being put away, and the faint hiss of the espresso machine shutting down provided a gentle rhythm to the closing. Yet her movements remained purposeful, guiding the flow of activity as if she were conducting a silent orchestra. He observed the way she checked the cash register, neatly organizing the receipts, and the small gestures she made to acknowledge the staff, each one conveying authority and respect simultaneously. Grayson leaned against the counter slightly, his thoughts focused on her, on the quiet strength she had displayed all evening, on the awareness that had allowed her to notice details that others would have missed, to anticipate needs before they were expressed, and to act decisively without drawing attention to herself. Outside, the wind rustled the bare branches of the trees, carrying the faint sound of distant traffic, while inside, the diner felt suspended in a moment of calm completion, a balance maintained by her steady presence. Every glance she cast toward the staff, every subtle adjustment of a chair or tray, spoke of competence, intelligence, and control, and Grayson realized that her influence extended far beyond the simple act of serving. She had created an environment of order, comfort, and confidence through her actions alone. As she moved to the back room to finish closing tasks, she paused briefly, glanced at him, and offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, and in that quiet gesture, he felt acknowledgement, understanding, and a challenge, as if she were inviting him to recognize the depth of her capability and to consider what he had overlooked. The warm glow of the diner lights reflected softly off the counters and windows, the evening calm settling over the space, and Grayson understood that he had witnessed something rare, a mastery of presence, awareness, and quiet authority that left an indelible impression, a realization that the story unfolding between them was only just beginning, and that the impact of her actions, subtle yet profound, would resonate long after the lights were turned off and the door closed behind the final customer.